Hi, my name is Miss Davis, and I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at Vista Grande, and joining me today is Miss Shannon. We're going to talk about the finale book for the Literati called Recursion by Blake Crouch. We're just kind of chit-chat about the book. I also have notes. One of the things the book is very suspenseful, and it's about this lady who develops this machine, this chair, with the help of different people during different timelines. Yes, different timelines. And she tries to fix what she built. But does she ever? So that's kind of the suspense of it. I would say it's kind of, at least the first 3/4 of the book is kind of Dan Brown suspense. What do you think, Michelle?
Well, and it was also kind of a slow build-up for a while. I felt like it was a slow build-up, and then it finally, you're like, oh, okay, I got that. So
it took you a while to get into it?
Yeah, it did. And then, because in the beginning I was just like, do I like this? I'm not sure. And then I did. And I'm like, okay, now I want to know what's going on, because it kept bouncing back and forth between timelines. And so you really have to pay attention to that, otherwise you'll get lost. And so, and to see are we giving names? So, because her name was Helena, that was the scientist for building going to fix for, are we like, how far are we giving into? I'm like, I don't want to give the whole thing away.
Right.
Yeah. So, she built it not for what it was used for. She built it for something else, and then when she found out what it was doing, she wanted to fix what was happening, because it was causing lots of problems in the future and back.
I thought it was actually thought-provoking. There's some parts where the concepts of the book that they touch on kind of haunting, and some people don't care, and they're not like, these are not questions that I think and dwell about on a daily basis, but I did for a while because I was reading the book. And one of the concepts was looking back at your life, like the forks in the road, like where literally everything changes. I mean, obviously you can say like every little second, every moment is that way, but we're talking like things that may have seemed kind of minor at the time, but change the trajectory of your life. So for me, a little personal anecdote was I was in college and I was actually applying to study abroad in Norway. Ended up starting a relationship with a gentleman in college, and it was my first relationship ever in the history of the world. And I didn't know how it was going to pan out, and I was kind of freaking out between should I attempt a love life or continue education over in Norway for a year and a half. And I actually stayed. And so, and that has been my life trajectory. So I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I went and studied abroad for a year and a half. That was like my first major fork or decision point in my life. Do you have anything like that?
Actually, I do. Yet again, it's a boy. No. So I feel like that everything always has a purpose, and I've always been in the belief that if you look back, I wouldn't want to change anything because it could change your future. And there's always the interconnection with people and whatnot. Well, mine was in high school. I met right out of high school my now husband. We've been together now 25 years. Yay. But before that, we didn't realize our lives were circling. They kept circling, and there was times where we actually connected, but we didn't realize it. So, like, he was dating somebody, and I was dating somebody, and they both broke up to date each other, but we didn't know that. And so then, looking back, we're looking at pictures, and he's like, I know that guy, and I'm like, I know that girl. And then to find out we were that close without even knowing it. So we kept circling for years before we finally connected, and then it's like, wow, and then plus there's things that happen when you're younger and you're like, oh, I wish I can change that, I wish I can do this, But now as an adult, I feel if I would have changed that, maybe I wouldn't have met my husband, I wouldn't have my kids now, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I've always just firmly, my path has always been whatever it is, that's where it's going to be, whether it's good or bad. I'm just going to stick with it because I don't want to change what I feel is my purpose later on. So, but this does get you to fix things, hopefully.
So she comes back to her, the gal, Helena, comes back to a certain point in her life all the time. A certain, so there, it ends up coming to that point, and it stutters and returns to that point, but not always the same point. It's the same point, but it's not the same point.
The outcome is the same, but then not. You know, because sometimes somebody died. Then you go back, now that person's not dead. You know, so.
Same, but different. But still the same. That quote applies here. Okay. The betterment of the species. I'm torn because we have people's like, oh, you know, you shouldn't play God. And I believe that. But I also believe we wouldn't be in the position we are in humanity if someone at some point didn't attempt that. And there has always been people throughout history who have attempted that. One hand, like, if not us, who? But that's like anarchy, right? But,
well, yeah. Then there has to be the checks and balances, because otherwise it gets way out of control, and it's like, okay, we're not God, but we're going to play God, and you're gone, you stay, and that's not fair. So that's where you have to kind of like, okay, somebody's got to have the morality of, you know, no, we can't do that, we can only do this, or, you know, because, I mean, even in here, they spoke of that, they made a little society, a group, and then even that group took it too far.
Progress is inevitable. We will always move forward, which is ironic in this book, as you'll come to believe, as come to see, because there's so much past that plays in this book. Yeah. But the progress he was referring to was the device, was the machine, the chair that created this mess in the first place. But then again, like I said, there's a lot of timelines involved, which stem from the past and past futures, basically. So I thought that was a really, really intriguing thing where, you know, some people, like, what do you hold on to? What do you let go? Because, you know, forward motion of, you know, time marches on, and is it progress? Is it progress? So I think of, like, you know, personal, private space visitations, if you will, that's going around right now. The author, I looked up the information about the author, a couple of things. So one of them was that he wrote the book in a relatively short amount of time, considering, and he was also recently divorced when he wrote the book. And so he was, it's interesting to want to know that, how you see how that plays out in the story. The author has said in an interview, or implied, that it was cathartic to write this as in a way to help him cope with his divorce. So I thought that was kind of intriguing. He also, side note, he also sold the rights before this book was published for a Netflix movie and a Netflix series. So there's semi-separate situations. My understanding there's going to be a movie. How do you see that reflected? How do you see the divorce reflected in the book?
Well, actually, that would make sense then, because there is parts in the story where I could see where it's his, like, release, his therapy, because maybe he put a little bit of his divorce and himself in it, because the character Barry, who did get divorced, and how he basically was spiraling and things for a while. But for Barry, it was, you know, him and his wife had a big something. I don't want to spoil the book, but a big ad thing going on in their life, like they just couldn't come back from it. And sometimes that's going to happen in relationships where no matter how hard you work at it, it's just there's no coming back. That's what happened to Barry and his wife. They just couldn't work through it. And so she moved on and he just went into like a funk and just spiraled down for a while until he got better, meeting Helena basically. And I could see that. I could see the author probably feeling better after writing that, and maybe it helped him process what was going through. So
I get the impression that he's working through like, would we have always divorced kind of thing, like the timeline. You go like
right.
Like in all the different timelines, would this have happened? Would we never make it as a couple kind of situation potentially, kind of
right.
Despite how they may or may not loved each other on the beginning, middle, and end of their marriage. But like, there's a nice thought that some people will say, like, and the romantic would say, I would choose you in every timeline.
Yeah.
But would it always be be a good thing in that timeline? Would it always end up happily ever after in that timeline? So it's kind of interesting, kind of like working through the mind thing of like how many times can we do this and try to make it right, and at what point do you let go? I thought the book was well written. I actually recommend. Here's the thing. Normally I don't do this. Usually I read the whole book before I recommend a book, but I was really excited about it halfway through, and I actually recommended it to about a handful of people. And then I was like moving towards the end of the book. I'm like, oh, maybe I need to rethink that, because depending on the person I'm recommending to, what their headspace is, it may not be a pick-me-up to read this book. They may not be distant enough to potentially appreciate it or what have you, or it may just not be their thing in the general. But the first half of it, I was like, oh yeah, I can recommend this to so many people because it's kind of like sci-fi, kind of, I don't call it fantasy, but kind of more of a sci-fi bent. And as I got through the book, I'm like, And I did have I had two people who actually started it and then got 4/5 of the way through the book. And then they're like both of them were like, we can't. They said it was really heavy. And they said they just couldn't continue on. So I was like, oh man, they had just 1/5 of the book left, but it actually got more emotional in the last 1/5 of the book. So that was a prerogative. That's their thing. That's fine. So I learned my lesson on that. So moving forward, I would continue to read the entire book before I recommend it to other people. But I still think it's a really good book to read in the sci-fi front of it. And it's also, I prefer to read the books before the movies and shows come out. So if you're kind of that person, then just know that, hey, this was a book first before it hits Netflix. And I don't know when that's coming. But, alright. So anyway, Recursion is our finale book for the Literati for this season. And next month, which is actually like in a week and a half from now, is the start of receiving the new book for the new season. The new season for the Literati will be in person. Yay! For those who like that, yay! In person. And the in-person meeting, our first meeting, will be in September. There'll be a little bit more information below in the caption box thing down there for the in-person Literati and how we're hoping to move forward. So thank you for joining us for the chit-chat for Recursion. And thank you, Miss Shannon.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next season.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book, so you should try it.